What happens when God allows the consequences of our sin to overtake our life, yet still refuses to abandon us? When betrayal rises, suffering deepens, and everything begins to collapse, can you still trust God? Welcome to Under the Word, where we daily read the scriptures, not for information, but for formation. Today's readings brings us to 2 Samuel chapter 16, 17, and 18, and Psalm 91. So as we continue through the books of Samuel, this is probably the darkest point in David's life. Absalom's rebellion is no longer forming, it is in full force. In fact, according to the Tyndale Old Testament commentary and the New American commentary, they point out these chapters are not just political upheaval, they are the outworking of divine judgment announced in 2 Samuel chapter 12. Yet, even here, God's providence quietly governs every detail of the story. So let's jump in. 2 Samuel chapter 16. As David flees, Ziba meets him with provision and a false report of Mephibosheth, as Jonathan's son. David, under pressure, makes a rushed judgment. Bergen from the New American Commentary notes that David's discernment is compromised under distress, leading him to injustice. And then Shimei cursed David, throwing stones and dust and calling him a man of blood. Abishai wants to strike him dead. I mean, just cut him down right there. But David refuses. In fact, it's very striking what David says. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. See, David's from the Tyndale Old Testament commentary emphasizes that David interprets his humiliation theologically and not merely personally. He sees God's hand even in opposition. Meanwhile, we see in this chapter that Absalom enters Jerusalem. And one of the men that he sought counsel from, Ashiphael, David's former counselor, advises him, really according to what not Samuel, I'm sorry, what Nathan said was going to happen, what the prophet was said going to happen. His advice is a fulfillment of the earlier judgment by God. But you see, at this point, then the rebellion is now fully complete. And then we move to chapter 17. And again, here, Ahithophel gives strategic military advice to David to quickly strike. He gives him, to Absalom to quickly strike David. Humanly speaking, it was absolutely brilliant. But another man that he seeks counsel from, Huishai, and so who's David's loyal, committed friend, and who offers an alternative counsel that delays action. In fact, the scripture goes on to tell us here in 2 Samuel chapter 17 that the Lord had ordained to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel. So this is critical theological statement. You see, my friends, this is teaching us that God is actively working through human decisions. In fact, the Tyndale Old Testament commentary, Davis, highlights that this is an invisible providence, God overturning events without spectacle. I just love that God invisibly working, providentially working, even when David was completely oblivious. You see, the delay allows David to escape and regroup. And then as you read the story, Ahithophel, out of shame, the fact that his counsel was not taken, he went and got his house in order, and then goes on to say, because he felt rejected, he took his own life. You see, my friends, this shows the tide beginning to turn, right? Not through forces, but through divine intervention. And then we move to chapter 18, and the battle begins. David wants to go with the with the army to fight, so that he learned his lesson from chapter 11, what happened. But in this place, the men plead with him like not to go, and he listens to them. But he gives the leaders, especially especially the leaders, a very specific instruction, and that they deal gently, right? So he says, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. You see, this reveals David's heart, still a father, even toward a rebellious son. Absalom, as we read, was caught up in a tree, and the mule that he was riding on just leaves him as Absalom hangs suspended, helpless. And Joab finds this story, finds out that was the case, and he tells immediately to the person that reports him, like, hey, why don't you kill him, and I would have given you 10 silver and a belt. And the young man responds, like, even if you gave me 1,000, I would not have done anything, for I heard what the king said, and I don't want to go against him. But Joab would not listen, and he goes and kills him, disregarding David's command. Bergen here, who writes in the New American Commentary, he notes the tragic irony of this. See, Absalom, who exalted himself, is now brought low. But David's response is devastating. Oh, my son, Absalom, my son, Absalom, I would have died instead of you. See, this is one of the most raw expressions of grief in Scripture. In fact, Davis, who wrote in the Tyndale Old Testament commentary, points out that David's lament reveals both deep love and the painful cost of sin. See, the rebellious ends, but not with triumphs. It ends with a deep sorrow, which we'll pick up tomorrow. And then we go to Psalm 91, one of the most quoted psalms. So in fact, Satan uses this psalm to try to tempt Jesus. See, here this psalm provides a striking theological counterpoint. He says, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. You see, my friends, this psalm speaks of refuge, protection, and deliverance. But the Hebrew word here for refuge, it also means shelter, right? So a place of trust. He goes on to say, he will cover you with his pinions. The imagery is intimate here. He shows us that God as a protector. Yet this must be read carefully. In fact, the Baker commentary on the Old Testament, Wisdom and Psalms, points out that Psalm 91 expresses confidence in God's protection without denying the reality of suffering. You see, David's life proves this. He's protected, but not exempt from pain. See, ultimately, this psalm points forward to the one true person that's our protector, our peace, our comfort. And his name is Jesus. See, who trusted himself fully to the Father, even through suffering. So, my dear friends, see, the readings from today together hold difficult but essential truth. The readings from 2 Samuel chapter 16, 17, and 18. See, we read David is humiliated, betrayed, driven from his throne, and grieves deeply. Yet God is working, see, preserving David in unseen ways, defeating his enemies, fulfilling his word. And then Psalm 91, it shows us that God is our refuge, our shelter, our protector, our deliverer. See, when you put this together, the unifying truth is this: God's protection does not eliminate suffering, but it guarantees his presence and purpose within it. Please listen to that. God's protection does not eliminate suffering, but it guarantees his presence and purpose within it. You see, David suffers under discipline, but he's not abandoned. You see, this points to Christ, the greater king who suffers, is rejected. My God, why have you forsaken me? And yet is ultimately vindicated. He rose again. You see this, and so these readings then presses deeply into our understanding of God. So in four ways. First, it challenges us to view, it challenges our view of suffering. That hardship does not mean God has left. We can go through hard stuff and God is still present. And second, it confronts our response to opposition. You see, David does not retaliate. He entrusts himself to God. Who knows if this is from God? If it is from God, I'm just going to accept it. And third, it reveals God's hidden work. See, even in chaos, even in the unseen, in the naturally unseen ways, God is still directing outcomes. And fourth, my friends, it refines our understanding of security. You see, Psalm 91 is not a promise of ease, but of God himself as shelter, as refuge. So as I close this reflection today, see, my dear friends, when life unravels, let us not assume God has abandoned us. Let us trust him even when we cannot see his hand. Let us not respond to hardship with bitterness or control. Instead, let's learn to rest in him. Let us go to him as our refuge. In other words, let him be your shelter. And remember, God is doing more than you can see. As always, my dear friends, I want to invite us to continue to return tomorrow, the Lord willing, to his word. Let us remain steady. Let us stay trusting. And as always, I want to encourage us, let us stay under the word. And once again, thank you so much for being in this space and for spending part of your day with me and watching this video. And if it has been helpful to you, I encourage you to share with friends. And so they may journey and read in the Bible with us this year. May God bless your day. And the Lord willing, I'll see you again under the word.